Hi, welcome to the Linux channel. I got recently a client from US who is doing some stuff in his Raspberry Pi stuff, and he is quite new to Linux, and he been into Windows and stuff like that. So he's looking for some assistance, and which is when we had a discussion about the Linux ecosystem versus Windows ecosystem. And quite a while ago I had got a student who had been around more than a decade in the industry but always been in Windows technologies, and he is eager to learn the systems aspect of Linux, and as well as the network software development and stuff like that. And similarly, recently just now a while ago I got a call or a query from a viewer who is just around 16 years of age or something like that, and his question is quite interesting, which is when I thought let me cover in an episode so that it's an interesting discussion. Many are not aware of this aspect. So his question is he is thinking to get into development or coding or programming, and he's confused whether he can go ahead with the Windows development platform or else Linux. And he's also saying that Linux is far difficult to set up, configure or whatever rather than Windows or something like that. So which is when we had an interesting discussion. Again, I thought I need to give some very fundamental intro that which way it differs, and as far as development is considered, it is up to them. It is not something I don't want to give any my opinion as such. I just want to make it very clear about this ecosystem, because many of them who are not in the industry, tech industry is fine, but I have seen often people who are in the tech industry itself, they are confused about the fundamental aspects of this ecosystem. So I felt let me clarify, and please note I am not going to support Linux or Windows. I just want to give a sort of unbiased opinion and also some sort of a big picture, so that it will clarify your doubts. And just because the channel name is Linux channel, that doesn't mean I am going to talk about good things about Linux alone and say something criticize about a Windows platform. If you notice, even I have another channel called FreeBSD Channel. Okay, so that doesn't mean I'm going to criticize other platforms. So the name mainly implies the Linux channel, the mainly implies the freedom of what that ecosystem is going to offer. So that is why I chose the word Linux channel, because Linux signifies that tech as well as the freedom. Okay, fundamentally that's what it signifies. So that is why the channel name. And time to time, if you follow my videos, I have even criticized many aspects of kernel as well and the open source ecosystems and stuff like that. So I am I'm not going to give any biased opinion. So this is something I can tell something so that it will clarify your fundamental understanding of this two ecosystems. So the first thing is if it's a question of choosing a career, you want to become a developer to work on Windows ecosystem or Linux ecosystem. Of course, if you work in any Java or scripting languages, in both the things you can do, because it is anyway OS independent, so there is no question about it. So when it comes to a question of application applications you want to work, and you can do in Windows or .NET and other platforms are there, you can do that. In Linux you have Qt, GTK and stuff, and sometimes even you should understand Qt, whatever you write you can as it is port to other OS platforms also, so you don't have any issues with respect to this thing. So it is already abstracted, things like that. But other than that, there is the most fundamental differences. To explain, I did this small analogy so that I can use this as a sort of a way for you to understand. See, I have done with the Lego something like this. See, you have this base plate. Okay, you can see this green color substrate, and within this two substrates you have few of the bricks laid like this. I just put random colors not to confuse with any structure. So let's assume this is your kernel. Okay, let's assume this is your Windows kernel, Windows microkernel or hybrid kernel, whatever it is. In the case of Linux, it is a monolithic kernel. So let's assume this is your kernel, and on top of the kernel, you have various other components. Okay, you have libraries, and top you have the applications using that library. Even if you run any Java code, Python, PHP, whatever, you will have that interpreters, and then you will have that scripts which will be running. And the scripts doesn't really know what operating system you are using, because it is anyway a script, doesn't care about OS. Okay, so this is what. So the question arises, if you are a developer for Windows, see this taken out this overall platform is what Microsoft provides you. Okay, so the entire base operating system and also some of the applications. Okay, let's put some couple of bricks over on top, and some few applications base operating system Microsoft gives you, and as a part of the developmental SDK, whatever, they are going to give you all the APIs. So if you are working on any system level aspects, if you are working even device drivers in Windows, you are at the mercy of using Microsoft's APIs. Okay, so this is what is the big difference. So you need to take whatever they have thrown upon you, and you need to use their APIs. Notice, you need to use Microsoft's APIs, and then you are at the mercy of these APIs. And let's suppose after the Windows 7, for Windows 10, they have changed some of the APIs, they have added new APIs. Then you are supposed to use the new APIs as a part of porting your old application, which is working in XP, Windows 7, Vista, whatever it is, to the new latest Windows 10. So you are at the mercy of Microsoft. So this is what is the thing. So as an external developer, I mean to say, if you are not a Microsoft employee, as an external developer, your level is to touch up to here. You can't go below this, okay, because this is a protected code, this is a proprietary code, it is a closed source, they are not going to give you the source code. So you don't have any option to see the code. Forget about seeing code, you don't any option of adding any code over here. Okay, let's suppose this is your kernel module or some specific capability you want to add here. You can't do that with Microsoft Windows, because the Microsoft have the control, and whatever the APIs they have exposed, you can do your creative stuff only on top of it, and you are at the mercy of Microsoft. Okay, so know your limits. This is what. So this is what. Unless until there is a conditions apply, unless until you are a Microsoft employee, then you are good to go based on your whatever domain you work within the Microsoft's team, the company's team. You can work bottom, or you can work in the middle layer, you can work top, any level you can work. So you will have exclusive control, and you can even write your own APIs and expose it to the outside world. So this is the control you get. So first and foremost, it's a question of control. Many compare Microsoft has a good look and feel. Linux doesn't have a look and feel. Microsoft, I can run games. Linux, I can't run games. It's all bullshit actually. If you ask me, that is complete bullshit and garbage actually. So the OS is not about the look and feel. Okay, if you want a look and feel, in Linux you can configure, you can change the themes, you can change the colors. You don't like even GNOME or GNOME or KDE or something, you can change them, and you can do your own window manager. You can select your own window manager. You have XFC, Mate, anything you want. And if you don't want that, you can do your own window manager if you're good enough. But that level of control you get. So this is what. Whereas in the Linux, they have, whereas in the Windows, they have done the entire base OS, they have done their UI, and you are forced to use only that ecosystem. You don't have any control to, poke around and do your stuff. Okay, so you should know the limits. And when it comes to a question of look and feel, as we know, any Android phone do have a Linux kernel, but do we use any Linux command line options? We don't actually, because it is abstracted by the higher level Android operating system sitting on top of the Linux kernel OS. Okay, so it is like a dual OS. So all Android phones are like a dual OS. You have an OS which works more like a microkernel. The Android works more like a microkernel sitting on top of the monolithic Linux kernel. Okay, so that's the beauty of Android. Okay, so if you are a beginner, it is going to still confuse you. Again, you will be asking the question that, okay, Android looks very good, why not a standard Linux system or something? Again, I'm saying you, in Linux, no one is abstracting you. You don't like Ubuntu, install Fedora. You don't like Fedora, install Arch. You don't like Arch, fine. You don't like any command line interface, take it out, just use CLI. You can install anyway Ubuntu kernel and use only CLI, and you don't you are not satisfied with this entire ecosystem, you want to go back to the older Linux distributions, then you can use Gentoo, you can use Debian and stuff like that. You are free to use, you are free to choose any GUI layout it provides. You are choose to uninstall anything which you don't want. You are free to add anything you want. You can play around. Okay, so that's what is the power it gives you. But it's not a question about how the look and feel is. See, whatever it is, the look and feel is like a just external cosmetics. See, I got some of these which I and my wife uses. See, this is Lakme this thing foundation. You can see here, by putting this, I can put some type of a patch on my face. It is not going to cure any heart diseases if I have. Okay, so it is just an external application. See, let's just take it out. Let me show you visually. See, there is this foundation. See, I am putting a small patch. Okay, so I have changed my look and feel. I have changed some color of my face by putting this stuff which looks like a tattoo or something. It is not going to change anything in my brain. Okay, so that is what is your UI is. Okay, so Windows, just because it offers some UI, it is not going to be anywhere superior. Just because Linux doesn't have any sort of support for some games or some stuff, doesn't mean that it is inferior or something. It all depends. You have a base operating system, and on top you can add your layers, and Linux, the open source community did something which they have done, and if you are not satisfied, you can do everything by yourself, and you can invent your own distribution, use the Linux kernel and put everything on top, and you can spin your own distribution. No one is stopping you. Okay, but this is not something possible with Windows. Okay, so you are at the mercy of Microsoft. The other important aspect is, like I said, in Windows you have this restriction, but when it comes to a question of if you work in Linux, what happens is, if you are a Linux developer, you may be a system software developer, or else you are just an application programmer. If you are an application programmer, maybe you will be writing some top applications. You don't have any control by changing any kernel parameters, so you don't have that sort of a know-how. Okay, you have liberty unlike Windows, but you don't have the know-how. Okay, so all you can do is you can write some applications, you can write your regular Java apps and your Python apps and stuff like that on top of this, but you are not any kernel programmer. But if you are very curious, you can learn about kernel programming, you can learn device drivers and anything, and then start modifying anywhere. Okay, if you don't want this tall, okay, you can even just break it apart. Okay, and then remove one brick and make it much shorter, something like this, and you can stack it up. Okay, something like this. So you have the full liberty in the case of Linux. Okay, you don't have such option in Windows because you are at the mercy of Microsoft's ecosystem, and it's a proprietary stuff, and of course you are at the mercy of that ecosystem. See, you can do something like this. You can make a lightweight kernel and make it fit to some embedded board, and you can change anything you want. You don't want networking, plug it out, throw it out. Don't support networking. You don't want video card driver support. Let's assume this is some router. You can take it out anyway. You don't compile the kernel with those drivers, and then that other subsystems. And let's suppose this is some network appliance. You don't need some of that file system support. You don't need a FAT file system. You don't need NTFS file system. You can anyway take it out and then just support what is needed, and you can customize. See, you are getting this type of level of control. You are going to make, if the company wants to make their own product, they can take an ecosystem like Linux and make any product. They can't take an ecosystem like Windows and make their own products. All you can get is Windows supported pre-installed laptops, Windows supported pre-installed desktop PCs. But you can't have a router which has a Windows OS, or you can't have some Casio watch which has some Windows OS. But this may have a Linux OS but not Windows OS. So this is the difference. In Linux, being it is an open source platform, it has that, you get that full control. You don't want this bottom base, or else you don't want anything in between. You can just change whatever you want. You can remove any subsystems, provided it is not hampering the core OS functionality. So you can remove anything. You can add your own memory management if you don't like what Linux provides. Anything you can do. Okay, so it provides that complete sort of visibility. First and foremost, it gives you that visibility. Okay, if you can't do your own code, you can't do your own modules, at least you can see there, tweak existing modules and change them according to your way, which is not essentially possible with Windows all the times. Okay, so you have certain ways you can modify, but beyond that, you are at the mercy of Microsoft Windows ecosystem. But in the case of Linux, it is not the case. You have the entire kernel code. Okay, you don't like this modern kernel, go back 10 years back, take some old kernel and then tinker around, and then you can use it. Or you just don't want the kernel which comes with Ubuntu. You can compile, you can download your own kernel, the latest kernel, 5.0 kernel, and then you can boot your Ubuntu which has old kernel with your custom compiled kernel. You have such freedom. You don't have such option with Microsoft. See, here we are not discussing some lawyer using an operating system, or a doctor or some housewife. Here we are talking about a professional, a fully sophisticated trained professional choosing his career whether to become a Windows developer or a Linux developer. And we are not comparing this with some type of lay person. So the lay person can be your mom, my mom, your dad, my dad, or your wife, or someone actually. So they may not be a techie, and for them it is all about the convenience of ease of use. For fine, it is, they can use Windows. What is wrong in that? Okay, so if you don't want Android, you can switch to iPhone, and if you find iPhone is not so comfortable for you for a longer run, let's ignore the cost and price, other stuff, you can switch to Android ecosystem. You don't want any more these type of phones, you can switch to any type of dumb phones as well. So you have that full freedom. Okay, similarly, when it comes to choosing this operating system ecosystem, let's not compare about how the GUI features which Windows provides versus Linux doesn't provide. And there are also some group of guys will compare about adoption of a desktop industry, why Linux is not getting adopted in desktop industry. It depends. There are various situations. You need better gaming support and other stuff. Yes, it is not there. It is what it is. And moreover, there is also this licensing issues. There are a lot of things when it comes to commercializing anything. There are a lot of things. A business chooses a specific way because it allows them to make money. If you make something in Windows, you have the option of selling that code or licensing that code. But if you do something in Linux kernel, you need to share that code because the kernel has that GPL v2 license. So if you add any code in the kernel as a module, then you are supposed to share that code. Okay, all these things are there. You can't sell this code without sharing this code. So this is all this obligations are there, which is why there are also companies which chooses instead of Linux, they choose FreeBSD for that specific situations, because FreeBSD, although it is not Linux, it is still a Unix clone, and many programs, whatever you write, even a C file, hello world, whatever it is, you write in a Linux system, it is going to work as it is in FreeBSD, because in the upper layers over here, okay, so the FreeBSD and Linux doesn't much change. Okay, there are few things, some library may be supported, some may not be supported, but most of these upper layers doesn't know the difference between any Linux versus FreeBSD. But the actual kernel is completely different when you compare a FreeBSD with a distribution of Linux. So if you ask me, the reason I like working in Linux is I'm not a person who much loves to work in low level stuff. In fact, I have discussed even one video about why I am not interested working in device drivers and all this. stuff. I'm not a guy who is a fan of working in those things actually. I like in kernel generally you can hover and you can work in other subsystems, which I like the most. Some of the subsystems I like the most, let it be storage or most importantly, as you know, networking subsystem. So I like having that extreme control. I like that complete control over that subsystem. I can hijack that subsystem, inject my code, I can do whatever I want in a ecosystem like Linux, which is not something possible with Windows. Okay, so if I want to manufacture a product, suppose if I have a company, if I manufacture a product, okay, and I want to architect a product, I can do with Linux ecosystem. I cannot do that Windows system. I cannot make one network appliance, having Windows or something in that. Okay, just imagine which network appliance you buy in the market. Any Wi-Fi router or something you buy in the market has Windows in that. Okay, so this itself is the big question. So you will not have Windows for this reason itself, so because it doesn't have that ecosystem. Although Windows have experimented with, they have experimented long back with Windows CE and other stuff for embedded applications. We know what is the outcome, because fundamentally it doesn't have that complete top to down ecosystem like what Linux can provide. At that point of time, Symbian used to compete, and Symbian, as it has that wide adoption with respect to embedded stuff, finally Nokia have acquired, and stuff like that. As you know, Nokia phones of that era used to have Symbian OS. Okay, so this is what it is. So finally it is all about why I like working in Linux is I will get that full control. Although I don't actively like myself working in low level stuff, I'm saying really low level stuff, let it be stuff in the Arch folder, or let it be stuff in driver folder, whatever, or process or memory or whatever. I'm not a big fan of touching these components unless until it is somewhere it is highly required or something. And again, I have the full freedom to modify whatever I want and then optimize the system and bump up its performance or change its system characteristics. Okay, so that's the sort of freedom I get. So I need to choose Linux for its the ultimate freedom I get as a systems developer, and also part I'm also an entrepreneur with whatever clients I work. We get the complete freedom to go any level down or up and then change the things and make products out of an ecosystem like this. So to conclude, it's all about your personal choice. If you want to be a developer, you should like some ecosystem. You don't want to bother about what is happening inside. You don't want to be a systems programmer. You can anyway choose any operating system, doesn't matter, let it be Linux, Windows, or else if you're a Java developer, it even more doesn't matter in which way you do, because Java code, whatever you do, it is anyway platform independent and it is highly portable code already you have done. Okay, but if you are working in any system level aspects, Windows provides you some restrictions. Okay, you can do several things, but more than that, it gives you a lot of abstraction, and whatever Microsoft have provided, all you can do is build things on top. All you do is build things on top, but you cannot do things over here. But if you are a guy who works in open source technologies, okay, let's not just limit Linux, let's include FreeBSD or any open source equivalent technologies. If you are working in open source ecosystem, you can technically work here, you can do this. Let's assume this is your system calls. You can do something in system calls. You can work on libraries. You can work in end user APIs. End user applications, and you can write your own APIs, expose it to the end user applications. Or else you can work in kernel stuff. You can work in upper layers of kernel, you can work in bottom layers of kernel, you can work in core OS aspects of Linux kernel, you can work whichever way you want to, whichever, level you want, okay, which is not possible with Windows. So there is nothing to get confused. It's about your personal choice, how much you want to go deeper. Okay, after some time, if you don't get satisfied with Windows development, the reason is you are working in a imaginary abstracted world which Microsoft have provided you, and you cannot go deeper than that because you are restricted with whatever APIs they have provided, as simple as that. And you don't have this restriction at all in the case of Linux, because you can work in any layer you want, and as deeper as possible you can go. Somewhere if it is written in C code, you will often find in Linux kernel, somewhere it is written in C code to optimize. They may even replace this C code with some inline assembly. So if you don't want the C code, if it is not so performing well after getting compiled with GCC, you can remove the C code and write highly optimized inline assembly code and make the code more efficient. So you have the full freedom. So finally it's a question of you want full freedom, full control, full visibility, versus you want the luxury of someone offering some framework and you just want to work on that framework and not to explore something within that. Okay, so this is what it is. So if you're a youngster, think about it and choose your career. It doesn't matter which ecosystem you choose. It's all about your comfort level and it's all about your passion and your interest. Okay, so that's about it. So be in touch via mail if you have anything to discuss, or if you have any such questions, feel free to discuss. Send a mail or discuss in YouTube comments, or reach me via WhatsApp, whatever it is. Okay, thank you. Have a nice day. Bye bye.